Girl interrupts grandmother's funeral and reveals shocking truth. Dad calls 911. As Lily stepped into the grand church for her grandmother's funeral, her heart raced under the weight of what she knew. The perfect image of their wealthy family was on the verge of shattering. Family, friends, business associates, the city's elite, had all gathered, believing they were attending a solemn farewell. But as Lily stood trembling before the congregation, the truth of that fateful night surged within her. She knew her next words would send shockwaves through their prestigious world, revealing not only the harrowing reality of her grandmother's final years but also the darkness hidden behind their picture-perfect facade. Before we dive into this shocking story that will leave you questioning who you can truly trust, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe. The morning sun cast a golden glow through the tinted windows of Marcus Caldwell's luxurious sedan, its light dancing on the solemn face of 13-year-old Lily. Sitting in the back seat, her small frame seemed dwarfed by the car's spacious interior. Beside her, Camila, her stepmother, sat poised in an impeccably tailored morning dress, her posture rigid and her gaze fixed straight ahead. The car glided smoothly through the quiet streets, the silence inside broken only by the soft hum of the engine. Lily's mind wandered, memories of her grandmother, Elena, flooding her thoughts, her warm smile, the comforting scent of her perfume, the way her eyes crinkled with laughter. The weight of loss pressed heavily on her young shoulders. Exhaustion tugged at her, and her head began to nod as sleep threatened to overtake her. Lily? Camila's sharp yet composed voice cut through the silence like a blade. We're almost at the church. Sit up straight, darling. You nodded off earlier. Blinking awake, Lily's heart raced slightly at the sudden command. She straightened her posture, wincing as her muscles protested, and adjusted the hem of her black dress. Yes, mother, she whispered, her voice barely audible. From the front seat, Marcus turned, clutching a framed photograph of Elena tightly to his chest. His red-rimmed, grief-stricken eyes softened as they met his daughter's. Are you all right, sweetheart? You look pale, and you seem tired, he said gently, his voice filled with genuine concern. I'm fine, Lily replied with a small, forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I just didn't sleep well last night. I kept thinking about grandmother. Marcus's expression shifted to one of shared sorrow. We're all grieving, Lily, he said quietly. After today you can rest. Take a week off school if you need it. As Marcus turned his attention back to the road, Camila reached out to brush Lily's arm, a gesture that seemed comforting at first glance. But as her fingers grazed Lily's skin, they pressed down on a tender spot, a silent reminder of the forceful grip Camila had used the night before. A chill ran through Lily's body, the pressure of Camila's thumb unspoken evidence of the secrets lurking beneath their family's perfect exterior. The car wound through the silent streets of their affluent neighborhood, Lily's eyes fixed on the approaching church. Its towering spire and aged stone facade stood resolute against the clear morning sky. Today those walls would bear witness to yet another solemn gathering, the funeral of Elena Caldwell, the revered matriarch of their family, a woman whose influence extended far beyond their social circles. For Lily, it was her final chance to say goodbye to the grandmother who had meant everything to her. The sedan came to a smooth stop before the church. A somber crowd, dressed in black, stood waiting silently. The tolling of the church bells echoed in the crisp morning air, a mournful sound that resonated deeply in Lily's chest. Thompson, the family's longtime driver, stepped out and opened the door for Marcus, who emerged, clutching the framed photograph of Elena as if it were a talisman against his grief. Camila followed, her movements deliberate and graceful. Her critical eyes swept over the gathered mourners, ensuring their attention was firmly where she believed it should be, on her, the grieving daughter-in-law. Lily stepped out hesitantly, feeling small and out of place next to her commanding stepmother. As they approached the church entrance, whispers rippled through the crowd. Sympathetic glances landed on Lily, making her feel exposed and uneasy. She lowered her gaze, focusing on the rhythmic sound of Camilla's heels clicking against the pavement, each step bringing them closer to the reality of saying goodbye. Inside, the scent of lilies, roses, and tuberoses filled the air, mingling with the low hum of whispered conversations. Soft light filtered through stained-glass windows, illuminating the church's polished pews. Marcus led the way down the center aisle, his steps heavy with grief. Lily followed closely, her fingertips brushing against the smooth wood of the pews as she passed. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, a blend of pity and curiosity that made her skin prickle uncomfortably. When they reached the front of the church, Lily's eyes fell on the casket. It was exquisitely crafted, its polished wood gleaming softly in the muted light. But it was the sight of her grandmother lying peacefully within that made Lily's breath hitch. Marcus stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he placed Elena's framed photograph beside the casket. The image showed Elena as she had been in happier times, her radiant smile and twinkling eyes a stark contrast to the ache that now filled Lily's heart. Lily stood frozen, her eyes fixed on her grandmother's face. She longed to reach out and touch Elena's hand one last time, but fear and propriety held her back. Instead, she closed her eyes and made a silent promise to her grandmother, to be brave and to honor the lessons Elena had imparted. Taking their seats in the front pew, Lily found herself sandwiched between Marcus and Camilla. The closeness to her stepmother made her skin crawl, but she forced herself to sit still, presenting the composed image of a grieving granddaughter that everyone expected. The priest stepped forward, his robes rustling softly as he began the service. His voice, offering words of comfort, washed over the mourners. But Lily's mind drifted. She thought of the countless moments Elena had been there for her, after her mother's death, through sleepless nights, in times of joy and sorrow. Now, as she sat in the church, preparing to say goodbye, Lily felt the overwhelming weight of loneliness. The church fell silent as Marcus rose to speak. Each step to the podium seemed to take immense effort. His hands gripped the edges of the podium for support, and when he began to speak, his voice trembled with raw emotion. "Elena Caldwell was more than just my mother," he said, his words heavy with grief. "She was the heart of our family, a beacon in our community. Her love, wisdom, and strength guided us through life's storms and calm seas alike." As Marcus continued, recounting heartfelt memories of Elena's unwavering love and strength, Lily couldn't help but feel that this day marked not only an ending but also the beginning of a truth waiting to be unveiled. As Lily stepped into the grand church for her grandmother's funeral, her heart pounded under the weight of what she knew. The perfect image of their wealthy family was about to shatter. All eyes were on them. Family, friends, business associates, and the city's elite, each believing they were here to witness another somber farewell. But as Lily stood before the congregation, trembling with the truth about what really happened that night, she knew her next words would send shockwaves through their prestigious world. What she was about to reveal would uncover far more than anyone could imagine, what her grandmother had endured for years and the darkness lurking behind their picture-perfect facade. Before we dive into this shocking story that will make you question who you can really trust, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe. The morning sun cast golden rays through the tinted windows of Marcus Caldwell's luxurious sedan, creating delicate patterns on 13-year-old Lily's solemn face. She sat in the back seat, her small frame dwarfed by the spacious interior, exhaustion evident in her heavy-lidded eyes. Next to her, Camilla, her stepmother, sat poised and impeccably dressed in mourning black, her posture rigid and her gaze fixed straight ahead. As the car glided smoothly through the quiet streets, the only sound was the soft hum of the engine. Lily's thoughts wandered, replaying memories of her grandmother, Elena, the warm scent of her perfume, her laughter during chess games on rainy afternoons, and the comforting embrace she offered after nightmares. The weight of loss pressed heavily on Lily's young shoulders, and her eyelids drooped as sleep began to overtake her. "Lily," Camilla's voice, sharp yet composed, cut through the silence like a knife. "Sit up straight, darling. We're almost at the church, and you nodded off earlier. Lily blinked awake, startled by the sudden intrusion. Straightening her posture despite the protest of her tired muscles, she adjusted her black dress and whispered, "Yes, Mother." From the front seat, Marcus turned slightly, clutching a framed photograph of Elena. His eyes, red-rimmed and swollen from grief, softened as they met his daughter's. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "You seem pale and tired." "I just didn't sleep well last night," Lily admitted softly. "I kept thinking about grandmother." Marcus's expression shifted to one of shared pain. "We're all grieving, Lily," he said with quiet understanding. "After today you can rest. Take a week off school if you need it." As Marcus turned back to the road, Camilla reached out to brush Lily's arm in what appeared to be a comforting gesture. But when her fingers grazed Lily's skin, they pressed down on a tender spot, the same spot where Camilla had grabbed her forcefully the night before. Lily felt a chill rush through her, the pressure of Camilla's touch a silent reminder of the secrets hidden beneath their family's polished surface. The car moved steadily toward the church, its towering spire coming into view against the clear morning sky. Today, those aged stone walls would witness another solemn gathering, the funeral of Elena Caldwell, the revered matriarch of their family, whose influence had reached far beyond their social circles. For Lily, it wasn't just a final farewell, it was the moment she had to decide if she could finally expose the truth. Noticing Lily's distress and the growing crowd of onlookers, Marcus made a quick decision. He turned toward Benson, who stood nearby. "Benson," Marcus called out, his voice carrying an air of authority. "Please take Lily in the other car. I think she needs some space right now." Relief washed over Lily's face as Benson stepped forward, offering her a gentle smile. "Of course, sir," the butler said, his kind eyes never leaving Lily's face. "Come along, Miss Lily. Let's get you settled." As Benson guided Lily to the second car, she could feel Camilla's eyes burning into her back. But for now, at least, she was safe from her stepmother's clutches. Once inside the car, some of the tension left Lily's body. The familiar scent of leather and Benson's aftershave brought her comfort, a reminder of safer, happier times. The car pulled away from the church, joining the procession of mourners. As muted colors blurred past her window, Lily's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. The cemetery loomed in her imagination, a place of finality where she would have to say her last goodbye to her beloved grandmother. As they drove, Benson cleared his throat softly. Lily turned to look at him, noticing a strange mix of emotions on his weathered face. Concern, determination, and something that almost looked like guilt. "Miss Lily," Benson began, his voice low and serious. "I know today has been incredibly hard for you, but I need you to know that I believe in you." Lily looked up, her brows furrowed. "You do?" Benson nodded and pulled a worn, black, leather-bound journal from his jacket pocket. "Your grandmother knew, child," he said, handing the journal to Lily. "She feared this day might come." Lily's eyes widened in recognition. It was her grandmother's journal, the one Eleanor always kept close, jotting down her thoughts. With trembling fingers, Lily opened it. As she flipped through the pages, her heart raced. Written in Eleanor's familiar handwriting were detailed notes, suspicions about Camilla's behavior, manipulations, and even thinly veiled threats. Tears filled Lily's eyes as she read, overwhelmed by the realization that her grandmother had known, and had been trying to protect them all along. The journal was filled with love, worry, and an unyielding determination to uncover the truth. Why didn't she say anything?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Benson sighed heavily. "She was gathering evidence, Miss Lily. She wanted to be absolutely certain before coming forward. And I think she was trying to shield you and your father from the fallout." Lily nodded as understanding dawned. Her grandmother had been fighting a silent battle, one that had ultimately cost her life. "So why now? Why didn't you give this to my father or me earlier?" she wondered aloud. Benson's lined face creased into a frown as he seemed to recall a long-ago conversation. Because your grandmother trusted you to have the strength and wisdom to know what to do with it. She saw in you what many overlook: courage. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. And I see it too, Miss Lily. Especially after the way you spoke up earlier. Lily nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you, Benson, for always believing in me. Now, he demanded, his voice laced with anger and disbelief. Camilla's eyes darted around frantically, searching for an escape. You have no evidence, she spat, her voice a mix of desperation and defiance. It's just the word of a grieving child against mine. It was at that moment Lily stepped forward, her voice now stronger and filled with resolve. We have proof, she said, lifting her chin in determination. Grandmother's journal. She wrote down everything she saw, your manipulations, your cold behavior, and your threats. Lily motioned to Benson, who stepped forward holding a leather-bound journal close to his chest. His face reflected a deep mix of sorrow and resolve as he handed the journal to Marcus. Marcus, his hands trembling slightly, began flipping through the pages. Eleanor's detailed accounts of her fears and suspicions unfolded before him, the weight of her words settling heavily over the gathering. The rain, now reduced to a drizzle, provided a somber backdrop to the unfolding drama. Marcus stopped at a specific page and read aloud, his voice trembling with emotion. March 15th. Camilla's behavior toward me grows colder by the day. I fear she never truly loved our family, that all of this has been about money and status. This morning, just after Marcus left for work, I saw her rummaging through his desk. What is she looking for? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Many had harbored doubts about Camilla's character, but hearing Eleanor's words was a shock. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength with each damning entry. April 3rd. After dinner, during an argument about my health, Camilla cornered me again, warning me to stay out of her business. Her eyes, they were so cold, so threatening. I fear for Lily. I must find a way to protect her and Marcus. When Marcus looked up from the journal, his gaze was fixed on Camilla. The woman who had shared his life for 8 years now seemed like a stranger. Is it true? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Did you marry me for wealth and status? Did you hurt my mother? All eyes turned to Camilla. For a moment, she stood frozen, the mask of innocence she had carefully worn for years beginning to crack. Then, suddenly she snapped. A bitter, derisive laugh escaped her lips. Yes, she spat, her composure shattering. Yes, I married you for wealth and status. Your meddling mother was always against me, poisoning your mind, telling you to take me out of the will. Her voice rose, hysteria creeping in. I've taken care of this family for 8 years. I deserve that will. You should be grateful for everything I've sacrificed. Marcus's face crumpled under the weight of her betrayal. His hands shook as he closed the journal, staring at her with a mixture of heartbreak and disgust. You lied to me, he said, his voice cracking. You lied to all of us. You killed my mother. You were blind, Marcus. Camilla shrieked, her designer dress now soaked and askew. Your precious mother was against me from the start. Always judging, always whispering in your ear. Her wild gaze turned to Benson. She even turned the staff against me. Didn't you, Benson? Benson, stoic but visibly pained, replied quietly, I serve truth and justice, madam, as Mrs. Eleanor taught us all to do. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, many now capturing the scene on their phones. Panic flashed across Camilla's face as she realized she was trapped. Backing away, she looked for an escape. The family's guards moved swiftly, blocking her path as Benson spoke into his intercom. Marcus, his voice shaking but resolute, raised his phone. I'm calling the police, he announced. This ends now. Lily stepped closer to her father, taking his hand in hers. He squeezed it tightly, drawing strength from her presence. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, cutting through the hushed murmurs of the crowd. Camilla, seeing the inevitability of her fate, deflated. Her shoulders slumped, and all fight left her as she stared blankly at Eleanor's open grave. The lead officer arrived, and Marcus handed him the journal. "Officer, I need to report a crime," he said, his voice steady despite the grief in his eyes. Two officers moved toward Camilla, securing her hands behind her back. She lashed out one last time, her voice shrill with rage. "You'll regret this. I gave you everything. You're nothing without me." The crowd watched silently as she was led to the police car, her once elegant image now reduced to shambles. The officer turned to Marcus. "We'll need to take Mrs. Caldwell's body for further examination and your statements as well. The journal will serve as key evidence." Marcus nodded. "Of course, officer. Whatever you need." As the officers coordinated their efforts, Marcus turned to Lily, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I failed to protect you and your grandmother. I believed her lies. But I promise you, from now on, I'll listen. I'll be here." Lily stepped into his arms, her tears flowing freely. They clung to each other, united in their grief but also in hope. Nearby, Benson stood as a silent pillar of strength. "She would be proud of you both," Benson said softly. As they left the cemetery together, a family forever changed, Lily clutched Eleanor's journal close. She made a silent promise, to her grandmother, to herself, and to their future. "We'll make things right, grandmother. We'll be okay."